The twin moons of Azirian cast an ethereal glow over the forest canopy, their light filtering through the violet-tinted leaves. Evan Reese watched the alien sky through the cracked viewport of his research vessel, estimating he had perhaps 15 minutes before the emergency power cells failed completely. The ship's diagnostics panel blinked angrily in red, confirming what he already knew. The atmospheric entry had damaged critical systems beyond repair. Evan ran a hand through his dust-streaked hair and mentally cataloged his situation. The primary research samples were secure in their stasis containers. His emergency beacon was transmitting, though who knew how long it would take for a rescue ship to arrive this far from established space lanes. The planet's atmosphere was breathable, according to his scanners, but everything else about Azirian was largely unknown. Log Entry 47. He spoke into his risk communicator. Emergency landing on Azirian successful, though the vessel is inoperative. Atmospheric composition within human tolerance ranges. Local flora appears to be bioluminescent with unusual pigmentation. No immediate signs of large fauna, but scanner range is limited. He paused, gazing out at the bizarre landscape. Trees with trunks wider than ancient earth redwoods stretched skyward, their leaves shifting colors from deep violet to turquoise as they swayed in the gentle breeze. Smaller plants clustered at their bases emitted a soft blue glow, providing natural illumination to the forest floor. "I'll establish a perimeter camp and evaluate resources," he continued. "The primary botanical samples remain intact, thankfully." This is Evan Reese, Botanical Exploration Division, signing off. With methodical efficiency, Evan gathered his survival pack, research equipment, and the precious biological samples he had collected from 3 other worlds. The ship's airlock hissed open, releasing him into the warm, humid air of Azirian. The planet's gravity was slightly less than Earth standard, giving each step a buoyant quality. Evan found a suitable clearing about 50 meters from his vessel and began setting up his portable shelter. The habitat was designed for extended field research, a self-contained unit with essential life support, basic laboratory equipment, and sleeping quarters. The work of establishing his camp kept his mind focused, preventing the creeping anxiety about his situation from taking hold. By the time both moons had risen fully in the sky, casting dual shadows across the landscape, Evan had completed a secure perimeter. Sleep came fitfully that night, interrupted by the unfamiliar sounds of an alien ecosystem. Whistling whines through strange vegetation, distant calls of unseen creatures, and the occasional rustle that seemed too close for comfort. It was during one such moment of wakefulness, as the smaller of the 2 moons reached its zenith, that Evan heard it, a thunderous roar that reverberated through the forest, followed by a pained howl that made his skin prickle. The sound was unmistakably that of a large predator, but there was something else in that cry. Intelligence, anguish, desperation. Evan sat up, his heart pounding. The rational part of his mind urged caution. He was alone on an unknown world, and interfering with local wildlife could be deadly. Yet something in that cry pulled at him, a call that transcended species barriers. Another howl split the night, closer this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of something large crashing through undergrowth. Evan reached for his medkit and stun pistol, both standard equipment for explorers. He hesitated at the habitat door, knowing that what he was about to do defied all safety protocols and common sense. The cry came again, weaker now. Activating his night vision goggles, Evan unsealed the door and stepped into the luminescent forest of Azirian, drawn toward the sound of suffering that cut through the alien night. The source of the agonized roars became apparent as Evan carefully navigated through the dense undergrowth. Each step brought him closer to the desperate sounds, which had diminished to low, pained rumbles. His hand remained close to his stun pistol, though something told him the creature was in no condition to attack. When he finally emerged into a small clearing illuminated by the dual moonlight, Evan froze in awe and horror at the sight before him. A massive creature lay sprawled on its side, its powerful limbs occasionally twitching in pain. It resembled a cross between an earth tiger and wolf, but far larger. Easily 3 meters long, with a powerfully muscled body covered in iridescent silvery blue, fur marked with darker, geometric patterns. Its massive head featured 2 sets of eyes, the larger pair glowing amber in the darkness, the smaller set a deep, intelligent blue above a snout filled with gleaming teeth. What appeared to be quills or modified hair along its spine rippled with bioluminescent patterns. That pulsed weakly. But it was the creature's predicament that made Evan's heart sink. A sophisticated metal trap had clamped around one of its hind legs, the serrated teeth digging deeply into muscle and flesh. Blood the color of dark mercury pooled beneath the wound, and the creature's breathing came in ragged gasps. The beast's head snapped toward Evan as he entered the clearing, all 4 eyes fixing on him with startling intelligence. It let out a warning growl, trying to rise before collapsing back with a whimper that seemed to hold more emotion than any animal sound Evan had ever heard. "Easy," Evan whispered, taking a slow step forward with his palms outstretched. "I'm not going to hurt you." The creature's massive head tracked his movement, the azure secondary eyes narrowing in what Evan could only interpret as suspicion. The trap itself caught his attention. This was no natural formation or primitive snare. The device featured intricate mechanisms and what appeared to be electronic components. It was far too advanced to be anything but manufactured technology. Evan carefully assessed the situation. The trap was securely anchored to the ground with some kind of energy tether, preventing the creature's escape. The beast had clearly exhausted itself, trying to break free, leaving deep gouges in the soil around it. "I'm going to help you," Evans said, knowing the creature couldn't understand his words, but hoping his tone might convey his intentions. "But you're going to have to trust me." He approached cautiously, each step measured and deliberate. The creature watched him, its breathing labored, but its gaze alert. When Evan was within 5 meters, it gave another warning growl, its massive fangs gleaming in the moonlight. Evan stopped, then lowered himself to a crouch, making himself smaller. "I know you're scared. That trap, it's not natural. Someone put it here specifically for you." The creature's ears flattened against its skull, but it made no move to attack as Evan inched closer. When he was within touching distance, he slowly reached for his medkit, movements telegraphed and non-threatening. "I'm going to examine the trap first," he explained, maintaining a soft, even tone. "Then I'll see about treating your wound." The trap mechanism was unlike anything Evan had encountered before. It incorporated advanced materials, perhaps some kind of programmable alloy, with circuitry embedded throughout. It was clearly designed to capture rather than kill, but the creature's desperate attempts to escape had caused the mechanism to dig deeply into its flesh. After several minutes of careful examination, Evan located what appeared to be a release mechanism. The beast seemed to understand his intentions now, remaining still despite its obvious pain. When Evan's fingers made contact with the trap, the creature flinched but did not attack. "Almost there," Evan murmured. "Just hold on." With a complex sequence of manipulations, the trap finally released with a pneumatic hiss. The creature immediately pulled its injured limb away, but rather than fleeing or attacking, it simply dragged itself a short distance before collapsing again, exhausted and wounded. "That's better," Evans said, reaching slowly for his medkit. "But we're not done yet. That wound needs treatment." The next hour tested Evans' courage as he never had been before. With painstaking care, he cleaned the deep puncture wounds using antiseptic solutions from his kit. The creature winced and growled but allowed the treatment, its intelligent eyes never leaving Evan's face. When he applied a regenerative gel that would accelerate healing, the beast actually relaxed slightly, as if recognizing the immediate relief the medicine provided. Finally, Evan applied a flexible bandage around the creature's massive limb, securing it with medical adhesive. Throughout the procedure, he maintained a gentle monologue, explaining each step not because the animal could understand, but because the sound of his voice seemed to have a calming effect. "There," he said, sitting back on his heels. "That should help with the healing, but you'll need to rest." As if understanding his words, the creature attempted to stand. It managed to rise on 3 legs, keeping the injured limb elevated before staggering and nearly falling. Evan instinctively reached out to steady it, his hand making contact with the thick fur of its shoulder. In that moment of contact, something passed between them. Not communication exactly, but a sense of mutual acknowledgement. The creature stilled under his touch, its amber eyes meeting his with an expression that transcended species barriers. After a long moment, it lowered itself back to the ground with a resigned huff. "You can't go far like this," Evan said, making a decision. "I'm going to set up camp here for tonight. In the morning, we'll see how you're doing." The creature watched as Evan retrieved his portable shelter and erected it at the edge of the clearing. When he returned with additional medical supplies, the beast had not moved, though its breathing seemed less labored. Before settling in for what remained of the night, Evan left a container of water within the creature's reach. From the safety of his habitat, Evan observed as the massive predator cautiously extended its neck to drink, wincing as it shifted position. Whatever this magnificent animal was, it was clearly at the top of the food chain on Azirian, an apex hunter brought low by technology that had no place in this pristine environment. As exhaustion finally claimed him, Evan's last conscious thought was to wonder who had set such a trap and why they would target this specific creature. The questions followed him into uneasy dreams beneath the alien moons. Morning on Azirian brought a kaleidoscope of colors as the twin suns rose in sequence, their light transforming the forest from indigo shadows to a riot of turquoise and violet. Evan emerged from his shelter, half expecting the injured creature to have disappeared during the night. To his surprise, the massive beast remained in the clearing, though it had dragged itself closer to a natural depression that collected rainwater. The creature's head lifted as Evan approached, its posture alert but no longer aggressive. In the full light of day, its magnificence was even more apparent. The silvery blue fur shimmered with subtle patterns that seemed to shift with its breathing, and its quill-like spinal ridges were now a calm blue instead of the agitated red of the previous night. "Good morning," Evan said, keeping his distance but maintaining visual contact. "How's the leg?" As if in response, the creature shifted slightly, revealing the bandaged limb. The dressing was intact, though stained with mercurial blood. More importantly, there were no signs of spreading infection or additional swelling. Evan prepared a basic breakfast from his rations while observing his patient. The creature watched him with equal interest, its quadruple eyes tracking his movements. When Evan approached with fresh water and a protein concentrate that his scanners indicated should be digestible by the local biology, the beast sniffed cautiously before accepting the offerings. "You need a name," Evan said as he watched the creature eat. "I can't keep calling you the beast or the creature in my head." The animal's ears perked up at his voice, its head tilting slightly. "How about Kashar?" Evan suggested, remembering an ancient Earth word for one with a mane. The creature's impressive ruff of thicker fur around its neck did indeed resemble a mane. "Kashar it is, then." The newly named Kashar seemed to accept this designation, or at least didn't object. After eating, it allowed Evan to change the dressing on its wound, showing remarkable patience during the procedure. The injuries were already showing signs of healing, which Evan noted with scientific curiosity. Either his medical treatments were extraordinarily effective on this species, or Kashar possessed remarkable regenerative abilities. As the day progressed, Evan divided his time between tending to his research samples and observing his new companion. He documented Kashar's physiology in his scientific journal, noting characteristics that suggested both predatory adaptations and highly developed senses. What continued to impress him most was the creature's obvious intelligence. It seemed to understand the purpose of Evan's medical attention and cooperated accordingly. By midday, Kashar had begun tentatively putting weight on the injured limb. By late afternoon, the creature was capable of slow, limping movement around the clearing. Evan used this opportunity to retrieve the trap that had caused the injury, examining it more thoroughly now that he could focus on it rather than the emergency at hand. The device was undeniably sophisticated, a combination of mechanical components and what appeared to be biological sensors. Most intriguing was a small emblem etched into one of the metal plates, a stylized design resembling a star surrounded by two crescent shapes. Evan documented the symbol carefully, unable to shake the feeling that it represented something significant. As the twin suns began their descent, Evan noticed something he had missed in the darkness of the previous night. Around Keshar's neck, partially hidden by the thicker fur of the creature's ruff, was a slender band of metallic material. It wasn't a crude collar, but rather an elegant piece that seemed to fit the contours of Keshar's neck perfectly. Within the band was embedded a small device, occasionally emitting a faint pulse of light. "What's this?" Evan murmured, approaching Keshar carefully. The creature allowed him to examine the band, but grew restless when his fingers lingered too long near the embedded device. "Someone's tagged you. You're not just a wild animal, are you, Keshar?" The night passed peacefully with Keshar taking up a position near Evan's shelter. What had begun as a rescue had evolved into something approaching companionship. Evan found himself talking to the creature, explaining his research and his predicament, while Keshar listened with what seemed like genuine interest. It was during the third night of this unusual arrangement that Evan was awakened by Keshar's low, rumbling growl. The creature had positioned itself between Evan's shelter and the forest's edge, its posture rigid and alert. Evan emerged cautiously to find Keshar, staring intently into the darkness, all four eyes fixed on something Evan couldn't yet see. From the underbrush emerged a six-limbed predator, somewhat resembling a massive insect with mammalian characteristics. Its chitinous exoskeleton gleamed dully in the moonlight as it stalked toward them, mandibles clicking. Despite its injury, Keshar rose to its full height, the quills along its spine flaring bright crimson. The display was accompanied by a thunderous roar that seemed to shake the very ground. The approaching predator hesitated, then retreated back into the forest with surprising speed. Evan stood speechless, realizing what had just occurred. Keshar had protected him, a gesture that went beyond mere coincidence or territorial behavior. As the creature settled back down, its quills gradually returning to their normal blue hue, Evan approached and gently placed a hand on its massive shoulder. "Thank you," he said simply. Keshar's response was a gentle huff and a slight lean into Evan's touch, a gesture that transcended the barriers of species and evolution. The bond that formed between them in those days would be tested sooner than either could have anticipated. The morning of the fifth day brought the distant sound of engines. Not the rescue ship Evan had been hoping for, but something else entirely. Keshar was immediately alert, its posture suggesting not fear, but recognition. Three sleek vessels descended from the sky, their design unlike anything in Earth's fleet. They landed with precision at the edge of the larger clearing where Evan's research ship had crashed. From the lead vessel emerged a procession that immediately established this was no ordinary search party. Guards in gleaming armor formed a protective formation around a central figure, a woman whose very presence commanded attention. She was tall and graceful, with skin the color of burnished copper and eyes that shimmered with an inner light. Her attire was both functional and regal, a bodysuit of material that shifted colors like Keshar's fur, overlaid with ceremonial armor accents. Her hair was styled in elaborate braids, interwoven with what appeared to be living crystals that caught and amplified the sunlight. Evan remained concealed at the forest's edge, observing as the woman surveyed the crash site with evident concern. She spoke to her companions in a language Evan's translator couldn't immediately decipher, a flowing, musical tongue that somehow reminded him of the patterns in Keshar's fur. Beside him, Keshar had grown tense. The creature's eyes remained fixed on the woman, its breathing quickening. Then, before Evan could react, Keshar limped forward into the clearing with a low, melodious call that was nothing like the roars Evan had heard before. The reaction was immediate. The guards snapped to attention, weapons raised, while the central figure, clearly someone of great importance, whirled toward the sound. Her expression transformed from concern to astonishment, then to undisguised joy. "Nizadra!" she exclaimed, using a word Evan's translator finally recognized. Keshar. The guards maintained their defensive posture as the woman rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside the great beast. Her hands moved with practiced familiarity over Keshar's form, examining the healing wound and the bandage Evan had applied. When she noticed the treating signs, she looked up sharply, scanning the forest edge where Evan remained hidden. "Show yourself," she called out an accented but clear standard. "I know you were there. What have you done to the royal guardian?" Evan emerged slowly from his concealment, hands raised to show he was unarmed. "I found him injured. I only wanted to help." The woman's gaze was piercing, her expression a complex mixture of gratitude and suspicion. "You treated an Azadra? The most dangerous predator on Azirian." "He was caught in a trap," Evan explained, keeping his distance from the guards who had trained their weapons on him. "A very sophisticated one. I couldn't just leave him to suffer." The woman's expression darkened at the mention of the trap. She rose to her feet, her posture straightening into one of unmistakable authority. "I am Princess Lysel of the royal house of Azirian. This creature you call Keshar is Nizadra, the royal guardian of my bloodline. His disappearance has caused great concern throughout the realm." One of the guards approached, whispering something to the princess. His armor was more elaborate than the others, marking him as a senior officer. His features were stern, his gaze never leaving Evan as he spoke. "My captain believes you may be responsible for Nizadra's capture," Lysel translated, though her tone suggested she was not entirely convinced of this theory. "He questions why an off-worlder would be present in the sacred forests." Before Evan could defend himself, Keshar, or Nizadra as they called him, intervened in the most unexpected way. The great beast moved to position himself between Evan and the guards, its posture protective rather than threatening. A low rumble emanated from its chest, not aggressive but clearly communicative. The princess's eyes widened in astonishment. "Impossible," she whispered. "Nizadra defends you?" The captain's hand moved to his weapon, but Lysel stopped him with a raised hand. She studied Evan with renewed interest. "In 10 generations, no Nizadra has ever bonded with an outsider. They are attuned only to the royal bloodline." "I didn't do anything special," Evan said. "I just helped him when he needed it." Lysel approached, her gaze moving between Evan and the creature that stood protectively at his side. "What is your name, off-worlder?" "Evan Reese. I'm a botanical researcher. My ship crashed 5 days ago." "A researcher," she repeated, her expression thoughtful. "And you say Nizadra was caught in a trap? May I see this device?" Evan retrieved the trap from his shelter, careful to maintain a non-threatening posture as the guards watched his every move. When he presented it to Lysel, her reaction was immediate and alarming. "This bears the mark of the Royal Engineering Guild," she said, voice tight with controlled anger. "Such devices are permitted only by direct royal decree, and I have authorized no such hunting of Nizadra." The captain examined the trap, his expression darkening. "This is treachery, Your Highness. Someone with access to royal technology intended to capture or kill the Guardian." Lysel turned to Evan, her decision apparently made. "Evan Reese, I believe you have become unwittingly involved in matters of royal security. For your own protection and to fully understand what has transpired here, I must ask you to accompany us to the royal citadel." Evan hesitated, looking at his research samples and equipment. "My work will be secured and transported," Lysel assured him. "But I must insist. Nizadra's injury and this unauthorized trap suggest a threat to the throne itself. Your testimony will be required." As if to emphasize the point, Keshar, Nizadra, nudged Evan gently toward the princess, clearly favoring his side where the guardian was intended to stand. "It seems Nizadra has made his own decision," Lysel observed with a slight smile. "In our culture, this is not insignificant." Evan recognized when choice had been removed from the equation. With a nod, he agreed to accompany the royal party, gathering only his most essential research materials and personal effects. As they boarded the sleek royal vessel, Keshar stayed close to his side, creating a curious tableau that clearly fascinated and disturbed the Assyrian guards in equal measure. As the vessel rose into the air, Evan caught his first glimpse of the world beyond the forest. Assyrian's landscape was a breathtaking mosaic of emerald forests, azure lakes, and what appeared to be living architecture. Structures that seemed to grow rather than be constructed, integrated seamlessly with a natural environment. At the center of this vista rose the royal citadel, a magnificent structure that defied Evan's understanding of engineering. It appeared to be a fusion of crystalline towers and massive, ancient trees, the whole complex pulsing with soft bioluminescence visible even in daylight. The city surrounding it followed the same organic principles, buildings flowing into one another in a harmonious blend of technology and nature. "Welcome to Elysium," Princess Lysil said, noting his wonder. "The capital of Assyrian and the seat of the royal house." Evan turned to her, suddenly aware of the scale of what he was witnessing. "I've never seen anything like this. Your architecture, it's alive. Our ancestors discovered that technology need not oppose nature," she explained. "The citadel and the city around it are grown rather than built, guided by our bioengineers over generations." The royal vessel docked at a landing platform extending from one of the higher towers of the citadel. As they disembarked, Evan noticed the reactions of those gathered to receive them. The sight of Nizadra, Keshar, walking alongside a stranger instead of the princess created a ripple of murmurs and wide-eyed stares. Lysil led the procession into the citadel, with Evan and Keshar following closely behind. The interior was even more remarkable than the exterior, living walls that responded to touch, lighting that adjusted organically to the occupants' needs, and everywhere the sense of being within something both ancient and constantly renewing. As they walked, Lysil explained in low tones, "The timing of Nizadra's disappearance is not coincidental, Evan Reese. In 3 days, I am to undergo the ascension ceremony to be formally recognized as heir to the throne. By tradition, the royal guardian must be present for this ritual. Someone didn't want that to happen," Evan concluded. "Precisely. Without Nizadra, my claim could be challenged by those who would twist tradition to their advantage." She glanced back at the massive creature padding beside Evan. Yet now he returns, but with an unexpected bond. They arrived at what appeared to be a grand atrium, a space where the living architecture opened to reveal a soaring central chamber illuminated by natural light filtered through crystal-like structures. Several people were gathered there, engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion. They fell silent as Lysil entered with her unusual companions. One woman stepped forward immediately. She bore a striking resemblance to Lysil, but was perhaps a decade older, her features sharper, her bearing more severe despite the elegance of her attire. "Lysil, we've been concerned. The Ascension Council is awaiting." She stopped abruptly at the sight of Nizadra and the stranger walking beside him. "What is this?" "Cousin Jaira," Lysil acknowledged with formal courtesy. "I bring news. Nizadra has been found. As you can see, he had been injured, trapped by a device bearing royal engineering marks." Jaira's expression flickered momentarily before settling into a mask of concern. "How dreadful. And this person, Evan Reese, a researcher whose vessel crashed in the sacred forest. He found Nizadra and treated his wounds." Lysil's tone remained even, though Evan sensed undercurrents in the exchange. Most remarkably, Nizadra has formed a bond with him. An older man stepped forward, his robes more elaborate than the others, his bearing suggesting both age and authority. "This is unprecedented, Your Highness. The royal guardians bond only with those of the blood royal." "Yes, Counselor Vexir," Lysil agreed, "which makes this situation all the more intriguing." Evan felt the weight of scrutiny from all sides. The palace politics were clearly complex, and he had stumbled into the middle of what appeared to be a succession crisis. Beside him, Keshar, Nizadra, remained alert, his attention shifting between Lysil and Jaira with what seemed like deliberate focus. "The stranger will need suitable accommodations," Lysil declared. and I would like Dr. Mayles to examine Nizadra's wound more thoroughly. Of course, Gyra replied smoothly. I will arrange it immediately. And shall we postpone the Ascension Council meeting until tomorrow, when you have had time to settle this unexpected situation? Lysil inclined her head in agreement. That would be best. Evan Reese must be properly debriefed about his discovery of the trap. As Gyra departed to make the arrangements, Counselor Vexier approached Evan directly. Mr. Reese, I must ask, did you observe anything unusual when you found the Royal Guardian? Any sign of who might have set the trap? Evan considered his response carefully. The trap itself was the most unusual thing. It seemed designed specifically to capture rather than kill. And it was well hidden. I only found it because I followed the sound of Nizadra's distress. Vexier's gaze was penetrating. And you say it bore royal engineering marks? You recognized these? I didn't know what they were at the time, Evan admitted. But there was a symbol, a star surrounded by crescents. Princess Lysil identified it as a royal mark. The counselor's expression remained neutral, but Evan sensed a slight tension in his posture. Indeed, very few have access to such technology. He glanced at Nizadra, who had maintained his position at Evan's side. And the Guardian's behavior toward you is most unusual. We shall have to investigate these matters thoroughly. Evan was eventually escorted to guest quarters that left him speechless. The room was a living space integrated with a small indoor garden, the walls formed by ancient trees that had grown together in perfect harmony. Light filtered through membrane-like windows that adjusted their transparency according to the occupant's preference. What appeared to be furniture had been grown rather than built. Comfort achieved through organic design rather than artificial padding. Keshar, Nizadra, was taken to the Royal Animal Medicine specialists, though the creature had been reluctant to leave Evan's side. Princess Lysil had personally assured both of them that they would be reunited once the royal doctors had examined the healing wound. Left alone, Evan took the opportunity to record his observations and experiences in his research journal. The botanical specimens he had been studying before the crash now seemed almost trivial compared to the living architecture and bioengineered wonders he had witnessed in just his first hours at the Citadel. Your quarters are satisfactory? A voice asked, startling Evan from his work. Princess Lysil stood in the doorway, having arrived silently. She had changed from her traveling attire into something more formal, a flowing garment that complemented the living architecture around them, embedded with the same crystalline elements that adorned her hair. Evan rose quickly. They're incredible. I've never seen anything like this integration of biology and architecture. We've had many generations to perfect it, she said, entering the room. Our ancestors discovered early that forcing nature to conform to rigid designs was folly. Better to guide it gently toward mutual benefit. Where's Kess? I mean Nizadra. Evan asked. The royal physicians have examined him. His wound is healing well, thanks to your care. She gave Evan an appraising look. Dr. Mayles was quite impressed with your treatment methods. I did what I could with limited supplies. Lysil moved toward the window like membrane, gazing out at the city below. There are matters we must discuss, Evan Reese. The trap that injured Nizadra. It represents a serious breach of royal security. The question is whether you stumbled upon a plot already in motion, or whether your arrival was somehow part of it. I assure you, my ship's crash was entirely accidental, Evan said. I was collecting botanical samples from the Cygnus sector when my craft developed propulsion problems. Azirian was the nearest habitable planet. A convenient coincidence, Lysil observed, though her tone suggested she was thinking aloud rather than making an accusation. Especially given that Nizadra has bonded with you. This has never happened with an off-worlder. Evan moved to join her at the window. I don't understand it myself. I only wanted to help an injured creature. Perhaps that is precisely why, Lysil said softly. The Royal Guardians have always been exceptional judges of character. It's why their presence is required at the Ascension ceremony. They validate the worthiness of the heir. And without Nizadra, your position would be weakened, Evan concluded. Challenged outright, she corrected. My cousin Gyra would be the most likely to benefit. As the daughter of my father's sister, she is next in a line of succession should my claim be invalidated. The implications were clear. You believe she might be responsible for the trap? Lysil turned to face him directly. I have no proof, but the timing is suspicious, and few have access to royal engineering technology. Gyra sits on the engineering council. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Nizadra, who padded into the room with surprisingly little sound for such a massive creature. His wound had been re-bandaged with what appeared to be a living dressing that pulsed faintly with bioluminescence. The royal guardian moved immediately to Evan's side, pressing against his leg in what seemed like a gesture of greeting. Lysil watched this interaction with evident fascination. He truly has bonded with you. This changes everything. How so? Evan asked, instinctively placing a hand on Nizadra's massive head. The ascension ceremony requires the guardian's endorsement of the heir. Traditionally, this means Nizadra stands at my side during the ritual. She studied the pair before her. But his current loyalty appears divided. Before Evan could respond, an urgent knock sounded at the door. A royal guard entered and bowed deeply to Lysil. Your Highness, forgive the interruption. Counselor Vexier requests your immediate presence in the Chamber of Archives. He says it concerns a matter of historical precedent regarding the Ascension. Lysil's expression tightened momentarily before she nodded. Inform him I will attend shortly. After the guard departed, she turned back to Evan. It seems our discussion must continue later. Please remain in your quarters for now, for your safety as much as for protocol. We are still determining your status here. After Lysil departed, Evan spent the evening exploring his quarters and continuing his research notes. Nizadra remained with him, seemingly content to rest near Evan while occasionally patrolling the perimeter of the living space. The creature's behavior was increasingly intriguing, a perfect blend of wild instinct and civilized restraint. It was during one such moment of observation that Evan noticed something he had missed before. When Nizadra stretched, the collar-like band around his neck shifted, revealing a small access panel that had previously been hidden beneath the fur. Curious, Evan approached carefully and examined it. What's this, old friend? He murmured. Nizadra remained still, allowing the inspection. The panel appeared to be a data access port of some kind, integrated seamlessly into the collar. Without proper tools or knowledge of Azerian technology, Evan couldn't determine its purpose, but he made careful notes about its design and location. Sleep came uneasily that night. Evan's dreams filled with visions of crystal towers and political intrigue. He woke to find Nizadra alert at the door of his quarters, the creature's posture suggesting something had disturbed him. A moment later, a soft chime announced a visitor. The living membrane that served as a door parted to reveal Princess Lysil, her expression troubled. She wore simpler attire than before, suggesting she had been working late into the night. Forgive the intrusion, she said, entering as Nizadra moved aside for her. But I've discovered something disturbing in the archives that cannot wait until morning. Evan sat up, immediately alert. What is it? The trap that injured Nizadra. I've confirmed it could only have been authorized by someone on the High Council. She moved further into the room, her voice dropping. And there's more. The records show unusual access to Nizadra's tracking data in the days before his disappearance. Evan recalled the collar with its embedded device. The tracker in his collar? Lysil looked surprised. You noticed it? Yes. All royal guardians carry bio-trackers that monitor their health and location. Access to this data is strictly controlled. She paused, studying him. Evan, I believe someone deliberately lured Nizadra to that particular location. The trap was waiting for him. A targeted operation. Evan concluded, the pieces falling into place. Time before your ascension ceremony. Precisely. Lysil moved to the window, gazing out at the bioluminescent city below. The Ascension Council meets tomorrow to review my qualification for the throne. Without Nizadra present in the traditional capacity, I would be vulnerable to challenge. Evan joined her at the window, Nizadra padding silently behind them. But he has returned. Doesn't that resolve the issue? Lysil turned, her expression complex. The tradition requires the royal guardian to stand beside the heir, demonstrating their bond. But Nizadra has clearly bonded with you, an outsider. This has never happened before. The implication hung in the air between them. Evan looked down at the massive creature beside him, feeling the weight of a connection he hadn't sought but now couldn't imagine breaking. "What happens if your claim is successfully challenged?" he asked. "My cousin Jaira would likely ascend instead." Lysil's voice grew tighter. Her policies would fundamentally change Azirian. She favors expansion, exploitation of resources, more aggressive relations with other worlds. My father's vision, and mine, has always been one of balance and preservation. Evan considered this information carefully. The trap had royal engineering marks. Could Jaira have access to such technology? Yes. She oversees the engineering council. Lysil's gaze was sharp, but I have no proof of her involvement. Making such accusations without evidence would only weaken my position further. Nizadra moved between them, his massive head turning to look from Evan to Lysil. The creature's intelligence was unmistakable as he nudged first Evan, then Lysil, as if trying to forge a connection. "He seems to understand what's at stake," Evan observed. "The royal guardians have always possessed wisdom beyond our understanding," Lysil replied, "which makes his bond with you all the more significant." She hesitated, then added, "There may be a way forward. An ancient precedent in the archives speaks of a time when a royal guardian chose a consort for the heir." Evan felt his pulse quicken. A consort, a partner chosen not by the royal family, but by the guardian itself. Lysil's eyes met his, unreadable. "In our history, the guardian's judgment has always been respected above even royal decree." Before Evan could fully process the implications of this statement, the door chimed again. This time, it was Captain Turun, the head of the royal guard who had accompanied Lysil from the forest. "Your Highness," he said, bowing stiffly. His gaze lingered suspiciously on Evan before returning to Lysil. "Counselor Vexier requests your presence in the preparation chamber. The preliminary Ascension Council has been called to order early." Lysil's expression hardened. "Early? On whose authority?" Lady Jaira made the request, citing urgent matters that cannot wait. The council agreed. "I see." Lysil's voice was controlled, but Evan could sense her tension. "Inform them I will arrive shortly." After the captain departed, she turned to Evan. "They're moving faster than anticipated. Someone is afraid." "What will you do?" Evan asked. "Face them." Lysil straightened, her royal bearing becoming more pronounced. "But I would ask you and Nizadra to accompany me. Your presence, and the bond between you, may be our strongest evidence against whatever is being planned." Evan nodded, feeling strangely calm despite being thrust into the center of alien politics. "We'll come." The Ascension Council chamber was a marvel of living architecture, a circular space where ancient trees had been guided to grow into perfect columns supporting a domed ceiling of crystal and living membrane. Tiered seating surrounded a central dais, and the entire room was illuminated by bioluminescent flora that adjusted their glow to highlight speakers or areas of focus. When Lysil entered with Evan and Nizadra at her side, a hush fell over the assembled counselors. Jaira, seated in a position of prominence, failed to hide her momentary shock at seeing the royal guardian accompanying both her cousin and the offworlder. Counselor Vexier, positioned at the head of the assembly, rose to acknowledge Lysil's arrival. "Princess Lysil, we welcome you." The council has convened early to address concerns regarding tomorrow's ascension ceremony. "So, I was informed," Lysil replied, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Though I was not consulted on this change of schedule. The matter was deemed urgent," Jaira interjected smoothly, "particularly given the unusual circumstances surrounding Nizadra's return." Lysil guided Evan and Nizadra to the central dais, a move that clearly wasn't the protocol, but which no one immediately challenged. "I believe the circumstances are not only unusual, but revealing. My royal guardian was targeted with technology bearing royal engineering marks, technology that very few have the authority to access." A murmur spread through the council. Vexier raised a hand for silence. A serious allegation, Your Highness. Have you evidence of this claim? At a nod from Lysil, Evan stepped forward. My name is Evan Reese. I discovered Nizadra caught in this trap. He described the device in detail, emphasizing the sophisticated nature of its design and the royal emblem it bore. It was clearly designed to capture rather than kill, and to be triggered by Nizadra specifically. Jaira's voice cut through the chamber. And we are to take the word of an off-worlder who appeared coincidentally at precisely this critical time? Her tone was reasonable, even sympathetic, but the implication was clear. Perhaps Mr. Reese is part of an external effort to influence our succession. That would be a reasonable suspicion, Lysil acknowledged, if not for one crucial fact. She gestured to Nizadra, who stood attentively between her and Evan. The Royal Guardian has formed a bond with Evan Reese, a bond that, as all here know, can neither be forced nor faked. The Council's reaction was immediate. Expressions of disbelief, whispered consultations, and looks of genuine wonder. Vexier leaned forward, studying the trio on the dais with new intensity. This is unprecedented, he stated. In all our recorded history, the Royal Guardians have bonded only with those of royal blood. There is a precedent, Lysil countered. In the Third Dynasty, when Guardian Sereth chose a consort for Princess Alina before her ascension. Vexier's eyebrows rose. You have been researching obscure precedents, Your Highness. When one's right to the throne is threatened, Counselor, one becomes thorough. Lysil's tone was pointed. From her seat, Jaira spoke again. A fascinating historical footnote, cousin, but it does not address the primary concern. The Ascension ceremony requires the Guardian to stand with the heir, demonstrating their unique bond. Yet Nizadra appears to have transferred his loyalty to this stranger. Not transferred, Evan said suddenly, understanding dawning. Expanded. All eyes turned to him. Encouraged by Nizadra's steady presence beside him, Evan continued. From what I've observed, Nizadra hasn't abandoned his connection to Princess Lysil. He's formed an additional bond with me. To demonstrate his point, Evan took a step away from Lysil. Nizadra looked between them, clearly conflicted, before moving to position himself between them, maintaining contact with both. The message was unmistakable. Vexier studied this display with evident fascination. Most remarkable, it appears Mr. Reese may be correct. Rather than choosing between them, Nizadra has chosen both. Jaira rose from her seat, her composure slightly fractured. This is a manipulation of our sacred traditions. The off-worlder cannot possibly understand the significance of the bond. Perhaps not initially, Lysil agreed, but Nizadra understands, and his judgment has always been the final arbiter in matters of succession. The chamber erupted in debate, counselors arguing points of precedent and tradition. Through it all, Evan remained focused on Jaira, whose controlled exterior was beginning to show cracks. Her gaze kept returning to Nizadra's collar with an intensity that struck Evan as significant. When a momentary lull occurred in the debate, Evan spoke again. There's something else the council should know. He described the data port he had discovered in Nizadra's collar. It appears to be an access point for the tracking system. Someone with the proper authorization could have monitored Nizadra's movements and led him directly to the trap. Vexier's expression hardened. Access to the Guardian tracking system is restricted to the royal family and 3 senior counselors, including myself and Lady Jaira. All eyes turned to Jaira, whose composure finally slipped. This is absurd. I have served the royal house faithfully for decades. To suggest I would. No one has made an accusation, Lysil interrupted smoothly. But the facts remain troubling. Nizadra was lured to a specific location and captured with royal technology. His absence would have compromised my ascension. These are not coincidences. Jaira's eyes narrowed. If you have evidence against me, cousin, present it formally. Otherwise, this is merely speculation designed to distract from the real issue. Your guardian has chosen a stranger over you. Not over. Evan corrected again. Alongside, Nizadra chose that moment to make his own statement. The massive creature moved deliberately to the center of the dais, then produced a sound unlike anything Evan had heard before, a complex vocalization that seemed to resonate with the very architecture of the chamber. The bioluminescent plants responded, their light focusing on the royal guardian. Lysil's eyes widened. The voice of affirmation, she whispered to Evan. Nizadra only uses this at the ascension ceremony itself. The council fell silent as Nizadra completed his display. Whatever he had communicated seemed to have a profound effect on the assembled dignitaries. Even Jaira appeared momentarily stunned. Vexir was the first to recover. It appears Nizadra has made his position clear. According to our oldest traditions, the guardian's choice takes precedence over all other considerations. This is irregular, Jaira protested, though with less conviction than before. No more irregular than a royal guardian being trapped by royal technology, said a new voice. Dr. Maelys had entered the chamber, carrying what appeared to be a data crystal. Your Highness, counselors, I have completed my analysis of the trap, Mr. Reese provided. The device contains a security signature that identifies its creator. A deathly silence fell over the council. Lysil stepped forward. And who authorized this device, Doctor? The signature belongs to Engineer Sovic, Maelys stated, who works exclusively under Lady Jaira's direct authority. All pretense of composure vanished from Jaira's face. Sovic acts on his own initiative in many matters. If he created this device, he did so without my knowledge or consent. Engineer Sovic is currently being questioned, Captain Turan announced from the chamber entrance. He claims to have explicit orders, documented in the Royal Communication System. Jaira's expression shifted from defiance to calculation. Her hand moved subtly toward a bracelet on her wrist, a movement that Nizadra noticed immediately. The Royal Guardian issued a warning growl, drawing everyone's attention to Jaira's motion. Step away from the counselor, Taran ordered his guards sharply. The bracelet is a prohibited communication device. What happened next occurred with startling speed. Jaira activated the device before the guards could reach her. Immediately, the chamber's crystal lighting flickered, and a high-pitched sound filled the air, a sound that caused Nizadra to roar in pain, dropping to the ground with his massive paws covering his ears. Evan rushed to the creature's side as Captain Turan's guards subdued Jaira. What have you done to him? Evan demanded. A specific frequency, Lysil explained, kneeling beside her guardian. It targets the neural pathways of the Royal Guardians. An ancient defense mechanism, repurposed as a weapon. Vexir had risen to his feet, his voice thundering through the chamber. Lady Jaira, you stand accused of treason against the royal house. The evidence of your plot is now undeniable. But Jaira's desperate gambit had not yet played out fully. The chamber doors burst open as armed figures entered, private guards loyal to Jaira rather than the crown. The situation teetered on the brink of violence as royal guards and Jaira's forces faced each other across the council chamber. You cannot stop what has been set in motion, cousin, Jaira declared. The old ways are ending. Azirian must evolve, expand, claim its rightful place among the stellar powers. Your father's isolationism has weakened us. Throughout this confrontation, Evan had been examining Nizadra's collar, searching for the source of the creature's distress. He located a small receiver vibrating in resonance with Jaira's transmission. The collar is receiving the signal, he told Lysil urgently. If we can disrupt it. Without waiting for permission, Evan used his botanical tools to carefully pry open the access panel he had discovered earlier. Inside was a complex arrangement of crystalline components, one of which was pulsing in sync with the painful sound. Drawing on his scientific training, Evan identified what appeared to be the receiver component and carefully disconnected it. Immediately, Nizadra's distress lessened, though the massive creature remained weakened. The standoff in the chamber continued, neither side willing to initiate violence in the sacred space of the council. Jaira's confidence was palpable as she addressed the council. Many among you share my vision for Azirian's future. The Guardian has been compromised by outside influence. The ascension must be delayed until a proper evaluation can be conducted. Some counselors nodded in agreement, while others looked uncertain. The delicate balance of power was shifting before their eyes. It was Nizadra who broke the impasse. Despite his weakened state, the royal guardian rose to his feet, shaking off the effects of the sonic attack. With deliberate steps, he positioned himself squarely between Lysil and Evan, then turned to face Gyra directly. The display that followed left no room for misinterpretation. Nizadra's spine quills flared brilliant crimson, the color of royal judgment, and he issued a deep, resonant call that seemed to vibrate through the very foundations of the chamber. The bioluminescent plants responded, their light focusing in a brilliant beam upon Gyra. The guardian's verdict, Vexir whispered, evident in his voice, not seen in 3 generations. The effect on the council was immediate and profound. Even Gyra's supporters stepped back, unwilling to oppose such a clear manifestation of ancient authority. Her private guards, their resolve wavering, lowered their weapons. By the most ancient law of Azirian, Lysil declared, her voice ringing with authority, Nizadra has rendered judgment. Lady Gyra stands condemned by the royal guardian itself. Captain Turon's forces moved in swiftly, securing Gyra and her remaining loyalists. The council, its unity restored by Nizadra's display, voted unanimously to proceed with Lysil's ascension ceremony as planned. As the chamber gradually emptied, Evan remained beside Nizadra, checking the creature for any lasting effect from the sonic attack. Lysil joined them, her relief evident though tempered by the gravity of what had occurred. "You saved him," she said quietly to Evan. "Again, I just disconnected the receiver," Evan replied. It was Nizadra who turned the tide. Lysil's hand came to rest gently on Nizadra's head beside Evan's. The guardian chose well, it seems. Their eyes met over the royal guardian, and in that moment, Evan felt a connection that transcended the strange circumstances of their meeting. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of shared purpose, shared values, and perhaps something more. "What happens now?" Evan asked. "Now," Lysil said, a small smile forming, "we prepare for the ascension." The ascension ceremony took place the following day in the Great Pavilion, an extraordinary structure where the living architecture of the citadel opened to the sky, allowing the light of both suns to illuminate the proceedings. Representatives from every province of Azirian had gathered to witness the confirmation of their new ruler, the pavilion a riot of color and ceremonial attire. Evan had been provided with formal clothing that somehow managed to honor both Azirian traditions and his human heritage, a synthesis that seemed to symbolize the unprecedented situation. As an off-worlder who had been chosen by the royal guardian, his position remained unique and not entirely defined by protocol. Nizadra had fully recovered from Gyra's attack, the royal guardian more magnificent than ever. His fur had been brushed to a lustrous shine, and ceremonial markings in luminescent pigment adorned his flanks and face, highlighting the patterns already present in his natural coloration. The ceremony itself was both ancient and breathtaking. Lysil, dressed in regalia that incorporated living elements, flowers that bloomed in response to her presence, crystals that amplified the light around her, proceeded through the assembled dignitaries to the central dais. There, Counselor Vexir awaited, holding what appeared to be a living crown, a circlet of intertwined crystal and organic material that pulsed gently with inner light. "Who comes to claim the mantle of leadership?" Vexir intoned, his voice carrying across the hushed pavilion. "Lysil, daughter of the royal house, chosen of the people," Lysil responded, her clear voice unwavering. "By what right do you claim the throne of Azirian?" "By blood, by deed, and by the judgment of the royal guardian." At this cue, Nizadra stepped forward from where he had been waiting with Evan. The massive creature padded regally to Lysil's side, then, in a move that caused a ripple of murmurs through the assembled crowd, turned back and gestured, clearly for Evan to join them. Evan hesitated, uncertain of his role in this ancient ritual. Vexir's slight nod confirmed that this departure from tradition was being acknowledged and accepted. With careful steps, Evan moved to stand on Lysil's other side, completing the triangle with Nizadra at its apex. Vexir continued the ceremony, though his eyes reflected his awareness of the historical significance of this moment. The Guardian has chosen. Do you, Lysil, swear to uphold the balance of Azirian, to preserve our ways while guiding our growth, to serve the land and its people above all personal desires? I so swear, Lysil replied. And do you acknowledge the wisdom of the Guardian in all matters of succession and rule? I do acknowledge it. Here Lysil paused, then added words that were clearly not part of the traditional ceremony, including the Guardian's choice of Evan Reese as bound to our future. A murmur swept through the pavilion, but no voice was raised in challenge. Nizadra's judgment was final in such matters, according to the oldest laws of Azirian. Vexier placed the living crown upon Lysil's head. The circlet immediately responded, adjusting to fit perfectly and glowing more intensely. Then, by the authority of the council, the will of the people, and the blessing of the royal guardian, I confirm you as sovereign Lysil of Azirian. May your rule bring prosperity and wisdom to our world. The pavilion erupted in celebration, the formal portion of the ceremony complete. What followed was a continuation of the festivities. Music played on instruments that appeared to be partly grown rather than wholly constructed, food that highlighted the remarkable biology of Azirian, and the formal presentation of representatives from the various provinces. Throughout it all, Evan remained close to Lysil and Nizadra, his status now formalized if not entirely defined. The trio received congratulations and curious looks in equal measure, pioneers of a new chapter in Azirian's history. As the celebration continued into the evening, Lysil found a moment to draw Evan aside to a quiet balcony overlooking the bioluminescent splendor of Elysium by night. You've been thrust into our politics without warning or preparation, she said, her formal tone softening now that they were relatively private. For that, I must apologize. Evan shook his head. I came to Azirian seeking botanical knowledge. I found far more than I could have imagined. And now, Lysil asked, a question evident in her eyes. Your research vessel can be repaired. You could return to your original mission if you wished. Nizadra had followed them onto the balcony, positioning himself where he could maintain contact with both. The royal guardian's preference was unmistakable. I think Nizadra has made his feelings on the matter clear, Evan observed with a smile. And I find I'm in complete agreement. A royal guardian's judgment is rarely mistaken, Lysil said, her own smile emerging, particularly in matters of the heart. Their hands met atop Nizadra's massive head, fingers intertwining naturally. Between them, the royal guardian made a sound of contentment that needed no translation. I still have much to learn about Azirian, Evan said. Its plants, its people, its traditions. And I, Lysil replied, have much to learn about the worlds beyond our own. Perhaps we can teach each other. The twin moons of Azirian rose fully into the night sky, casting their ethereal light over the citadel. Below them, the city pulsed with celebration, while above, stars promised worlds and possibilities yet unexplored. Between these realms of possibility stood three figures on a balcony, a newly crowned sovereign, an off-world botanist, and a magnificent creature that had brought them together. In that moment, boundaries of species and origin seemed to fade in importance compared to the connections they had formed. Nizadra's judgment had revealed a truth that transcended traditional definitions of loyalty and belonging, that bonds of trust, compassion, and perhaps love could form across the greatest of distances, creating something new and stronger than what had existed before. As Evan looked out over the bioluminescent splendor of his new home, with Lysil's hand in his and Nizadra's steadfast presence beside them, he reflected that his unplanned arrival on this world had led to the most profound discovery of his career, not a new plant species or biological phenomenon, but the universal capacity for connection that proved some things remain constant, even across the vast distances between stars.